Hey guys. Trying to make sure I got everything ready to go. Make sure you're good. All right. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Yes, Chase, Mr. Clifford, he has different videos. He's got an ultimate review video that's like everything you need to know, super fast. And then he has videos where he goes in each thing in detail, each individual one. I texted you guys out a link to the one he just did earlier where he did his FRQ predictions and what he thinks the FRQ topics are going to be for this year. So I sent that one out to you just recently. So I wanted to make sure I answered any questions you have, any last minute questions, and talked about, shoot, just my list, the most missed topics and stuff like that. So to start, do you guys have any questions? Anything? I'm going to go over. All right. You have ACE, Psych, and Econ tomorrow morning. What order do you take them in? Are you on my remind? Because I texted like 15 messages about that exact thing this evening to anyone who's subscribed to Remind. So you should already know, but AP comes first. You have to do AP Econ first, and then you move to ACE Psych. AP Econ in the gym, you need to be in there by 7:30 a.m. 7:30 a.m. They're opening the doors to let you guys find your seats at 7:20. 7:20 a.m. Make sure you are there. Okay. They have to get you guys started at 8 a.m. Like when they say you may open your test and begin, that has to be at 8 a.m. But remember from Gov, there's a whole bunch of crap they got to read before they get there. So you need to be there on time, not late, because they have to get you guys done and out of there because they have to reset the whole gym for senior graduation rehearsal. And those of you that are going from econ to psych have to have time to finish psych before graduation rehearsal. So be on time. Okay. All right. There are only 3 FRQs in econ. There is the multiple choice section with 60 questions, and then there's the FRQ section that has 3 FRQs. Number 1 is the long one, 2 and 3 are the short ones. That's the way it works always. Can I go over monopolies and perfect comp and all that stuff? I did yesterday night. I did a whole video on monopolies yesterday night. And I did a video on perfect comp 2 nights ago. So I have those already done. So watch those. Watch those videos. Okay. I want to make sure I talk about factor markets because that's where I left off. And I think a lot of people get confused there. So I've talked the last 2 nights, 3 nights about product markets. And I'm going to pull up our circular flow again so we can know where we're at. So here's the circular flow model. And I was talking about product markets. This is supply and demand. Okay. And that's where we've been. Now I'm going to move down here to the factor market because the factor market is the market for labor where we hire and fire workers. And this market is important because if you watch Mr. Clifford, you would know that he predicted one of your 3 FRQs is going to be on factor markets, on labor. And so I want to make sure we're good on those graphs. Now, the labor market is a special kind of demand. It's called derived demand. And it's derived demand because they derive their demand for workers from the demand for their product. When more people demand their product, they have a higher demand for workers. When fewer people demand their product, they have a lower demand for workers. So it's a derived demand. Now, in the factor market, because we're on the other side of the circular flow model, a couple things change, all right? So here is a perfectly competitive resource or factor market graph. Okay. So on this graph, you can see right here, we have our wages and our quantity of workers. We have our supply of workers, and we have our demand for workers. The equilibrium point of this perfectly competitive labor market becomes the wage rate. This is equal to the supply because we are in the factor market. We are not in the product market. So there is no Mr. DARP. Instead, we have MRC equals S, okay? And then here's our demand for workers. That's our MRP, our marginal revenue product. Our demand for workers is based on their revenue product, how much money they're making us, okay? And our supply, our MRC, is our wage rate, how much we pay them. Of course, if we want to profit maximize, we are going to pay where MRP equals MRC, because that's going to make us profit maximization, all right? MRP equals MRC. All right, so now that was the perfectly competitive wage rate market. For an imperfect market, this one, if you remember, we had a huge lecture on not being a teacher. And I talked about this graph 100 times when I talked about don't be a teacher. And we have our wage rates and our quantity of workers, our downward sloping MRP, our upward sloping supply, and our even higher MRC, okay? And this is just like a mirror image of our monopoly graph, okay? Because remember, for a monopoly, you have demand and marginal revenue. On a labor market, we have supply and MRC, okay? Supply and MRC. Now, when we're determining wage rates in a perfectly competitive market, we would be there at point A, but this is not perfectly competitive. So what they're going to do is they are going to want to hire at MRP equals MRC. They hire at point B, okay? But they don't pay them point B. They're only going to pay them point C. They drop it down. So the wage rate for them would be WM because they can pay them less because they have the market power, all right? So that is the market graphs. Now, the only other thing I didn't talk about was externalities, and I can show you the two graphs and mention those real quick, or you can go back and look at our notes from externalities, but I wanted to make sure you guys had no questions or answer any questions. Externalities. Yes, sir. Okay. So there's the two different types of externalities, negative and positive. Negative externalities are when the social cost, the MSC, the cost to society, is higher than the private cost to the company. Oh, what is an externality? Kinsey, an externality is when the market produces at a rate, the market produces at a quantity and price that is not socially optimal. We're not doing what is best for society. And what is happening is our companies, without government intervention, are going to do what's best for them. They're going to produce where their private cost and marginal private cost and marginal private benefit are equal. So they don't care about pollution, and they don't care about, lung cancer. They still are going to produce the cars, or they're still going to produce the cigarettes because they sell and they make money. So here is a negative externality, okay? So here's a negative externality graph. Now, in this negative externality, we have our private cost and our social cost. A company on its own is going to produce right here, where the marginal private cost equals the marginal private benefit. P is for private. So they would make this much. But society really only wants them to make this much right here. So too much is getting made, and that's going to cause problems, okay? That's problems. So we correct this through a tax, or a per unit tax would cause that private cost curve to increase and shift to the left. Would cause that private cost curve to shift to the left until it matches the the social cost curve, and that would correct that externality. The other type of externality is a positive externality. And a positive externality has extra benefits. It's when people that don't pay to produce or consume the good benefit from the good. And this is like education, or when we talked about your neighbor buys a fire alarm, or if the guy across the street from your house landscapes his yard. Like all these things that happen that benefit you when you don't even pay for it. So you're a free rider on their bill. And what happens here is we have the marginal social benefit is way up here, and the marginal private benefit is way down here. So a company all by itself is only going to do this much at this price. But if we have a subsidy, some sort of incentive to get a company to make more, we can shift their production to here to match MSB, which is our societal benefit. This is what society wants. This is what a private company is willing to do. So we need to get them to make more of the product. And we do that by subsidizing them, giving them more money per unit. Per unit is what is important, because the per unit is what changes their costs. And if it's a per unit tax or a per unit subsidy, that's going to cause their individual unit cost to go, their marginal cost to either go up or down. And ultimately, that's going to be what benefits the rest of society in the long run. So that's the ultimate goal. All right. Oh, duh. I'm really tired. I'm sorry. There's either surplus or shortage. Kind of. Yes, kind of. No. It's not like a price ceiling or a price floor. It's just under production or overproduction. So there's no necessarily price restrictions being input, but there's under and overproduction of that good. All right. Kinsey, when we did externalities in class, was the lesson where you guys were the family and you threw the trash into the big lake and it was polluted, and then the kids had to clean up the lake. Any must-know equations? Yes. Elasticity. You got to know elasticity and the 4 types of elasticity. You have to know MR equals MC. You have to know total revenue. I would say marginal utility. Here is a formula chart. You know what? I'll post it on Google Classroom. There's a 2-page formula chart. I printed it up and gave it out, but I will post it on Google Classroom in a minute. 4 types of elasticity. No calculators on this exam. Yes, there are 4 types of elasticity, Kinsey. There is elasticity of demand, elasticity of supply, cross-price elasticity of demand, and income elasticity of demand. Those are 4 types of elasticity. While I'm waiting a second, I'm going to try and post for you guys on the Google Classroom site that formula sheet. Let me see if I can attach this. I'm not looking at the live chat right now, guys, so I do not know if something is being asked. Give me a second. Give me like 2 more seconds. I'm giving you a couple of things just to flip through as you're working. All right. I think that is good. Okay. All right. Okay, on the Google Classroom page, I just posted the formula chart that I just held up, and I also posted the essential graphs, which is the sheet I've been holding up as well. So you have both of those posted on Google Classroom now. Okay. Yes, Chase. Okay. The other thing Mr. Clifford said he was 100% positive would be on the exam as an FRQ was a side-by-side graph. And those side-by-side graphs are when you have your initial market or industry graph, that's your supply and demand. Supply and demand means for everybody, okay? So you draw your market graph for everybody's supply and demand. And then the next graph next to it is for the individual firm. And that's where you have Mr. DARP, okay? So the market is supply and demand. I drew this the other day for somebody, so I'm going to see if I have it still. Give me a second. I have to unplug my computer because I have to walk over. So you got to give me a second. Okay. Here's my notepad and paper. Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay. So here is my notes. If I were a side-by-side graph, where would I be? Okay. So on the side-by-side graph, okay. So here is a side-by-side graph. So you can see over here, this is the industry or the market. That's everybody together. And you have P, Q, S, and D, right? It's PS and DQ. And then you have your equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity for the industry or for the market. That leads over next to it to this graph for the firm. That's one individual company. That's Mr. DARP. And that's where we have our Nike Check MC curve. And we have our quantity for the firm labeled, and I labeled that QF, or quantity for the firm. So that is the side-by-side graphs. That is side-by-side for a perfectly competitive product market. That is not perfectly competitive labor market. The perfectly competitive labor market side-by-side is what I showed you at the beginning of this video. Yes, the firm I just showed you was making a profit. Yes, this one is making a profit because you can see that ATC. Actually, no, this one is a loss because ATC is above Mr. DARP. So this box is their loss, but they're not shutting down because there's variable. Okay, so this is a loss without shutting down. Now, if Mr. DARP was on the top and ATC was on the bottom, then they would be making a profit. And if ATC is equal to Mr. DARP, if MC equals MR equals D equals AR equals P equals ATC, remember when everything is equal, that means we're at long run equilibrium. We're at LRE. Kinsey, if it isn't perfectly competitive, you're not going to have side-by-side graphs. Because a monopoly doesn't have a market. A monopoly is its own firm and it's a price maker. So it sets its own price. This is a price taker. This company takes whatever price the market says. When we did the candy, I think they were the peppermints. I think they were peppermints when we did the candy, right? And whoever had the peppermint had to just pay whatever the buyer wanted them to pay. So that's why it looks like this. And then Kenzie, yes, shutdown decision is priced below ABC, correct? So if this curve right here happened to be above Mr. DARP, that would be a shutdown. Right here it's below, so this is a loss but not shutting down. And if they're both down here, that's a profit. Profit, right? Tribe, determinants of demand. Tribe are the factors that shift demand to the left or the right. They include consumer taste preferences in advertising, related goods, either substitutes or complements for that good, changes in income, changes in buyer demographics, and consumer expectations. Yes, it's the determinants of demand. All of those things will make demand for a good go up or demand for the good go down. Remember, up is to the right, down is to the left, left is less. Yes, Kenzie. Rotten is the determinants of supply. That's our resource or input prices changing. That's the opportunity cost to make something else. Taxes and subsidies, technology, expectations, and the number of suppliers in the market. And all of those factors shift supply either to the right or to the left. Go to bed, Chase. Set your alarm. Set your alarm, guys. Make sure you go to bed. Do not stay up all night studying. All right, guys. I'm going to give you another minute or two, and then I'm going to bed because I have to proctor tomorrow, and that's going to be exhausting. That's it. All right. Then don't stay up all night. Get sleep. And I'll see you outside the gym. Be there by 7:20, guys. 7:20. Don't be late. All right. Have a great night and get some sleep.